of the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at Washington State University. Online at NWP.
Tip top. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, December 5th. This is a Moscow City Council meeting. We are now in session. Jim?
Would you like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. I will be reading a Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day proclamation. Whereas Congress has designated December 7th as National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, and whereas that date is set aside each year in solemn recognition of the events which occurred at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in 1841, when America was attacked by military forces of Imperial Japan. And whereas this year marks the 75th anniversary of that event that led to America's involvement in World War II, and whereas more than 2,400 people perished and more than 1,100 were wounded in that attack, and whereas we wish to honor the brave men and women who served in that war and to reflect on the sacrifices of so many others who have shared their devotion to duty and freedom, whereas the City of Moscow will recognize the occasion by flying the flag of the United States at half-staff until sunset on that date, in reverence for those who died protecting the freedoms that we enjoy today. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, the Mayor of the City of Moscow, call upon the residents of our community to join us in a moment of silence to honor those who died at Pearl Harbor in service to our country. Thank you all. With that, we will move on to consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda, approval of the City Council minutes from November 21st, the ITD state-local agreement, and the professional services agreement for design and construction management for the City of Moscow.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by John and a second by Jim to approve the consent agendas, items A, B, and C. I will, and with Jim's second, I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, they are approved. Item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary, do you have anything, sir?
No report this evening, sir.
Now, item number 3 is mayoral appointments, and I have none. We're clipping along quite nicely, folks. We've got a good crowd of kids here. We need to make this stretch out a little bit so these kids from the university can enjoy a longer meeting. Item number 4 is public comment and mayor's response period. What we do is we open up the floor for folks to come to the podium and talk to us about anything that they wish to talk about, as long as it is not on tonight's agenda or something that is in front of Planning and Zoning or the Board of Adjustments. And if you would like to speak, you have 3 minutes. And please give us your name and your address, and feel free to come up and talk to us.
Good evening. My name is Diana Armstrong, and I live at 116 West Morton. It's really a pleasure to see all these students here. I'll try to draw this out, but I only have 3 minutes. So I am one of the many people who care a lot about the bicycle, pedestrian, wheelchair bridge over 3rd Street. You drive down to the end of 3rd Street, Paradise Creek runs through there. There's no way to cross it except by jumping across Paradise Creek. And for about 11 years now, people have been trying to get a pedestrian, bicycle, wheelchair bridge built over that. And I was very disappointed last city council meeting. That was wonderful, except for this one thing. I was very disappointed that Walter Steed and John Weber were able to table moving ahead with this project until next June. It has been in the public mind for a long time, and I intend to keep it there as much as I can between now and next June, and after next June. So I understand your issues, Mr. McDonald. 27 issues or projects on your plate is too much. It's certainly very many. But this is an issue of safety as well as convenience. Have you walked out there? I ask people, have you walked out there and looked at that? Now, for a kid, it's not so easy. They're probably not going to fall off. Kids are going to love jumping across that creek. However, it's really possible for someone to slip and fall. And my question to the council is, how are you going to reply to a parent if this should happen, that their kid falls in there and breaks their neck? There's a liability issue here, and maybe it's not legal because I don't know how that works. But there's certainly a moral liability here, since this issue of making this simple bridge has been in the public mind for 11 years, and how much money has been donated by citizens, $7,000 or something like that, and it's still tabled. So I just ask you, Mr. McDonald, to please do what you can. If you find a fair, a spare minute, a spare time, to see if you can move ahead with those cost estimates, so that when June gets here, we can have some information. We need more information. I understand that. We can maybe finally move ahead with this project. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, others would like to come up and speak. This is a good time for one of you students to get up and from your class and talk if you want. You can talk about anything if you wish. But you don't have to. I'm putting you on the spot now. You can tell your professor that the mayor put you on the spot, but you didn't have to do it. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment session. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is our airport realignment project update. Tony Bean is here with us, and he's got a presentation. He's going to show us where we're at on our airport. Tony, how are you?
I'm good. Let's see here. Hey, it actually worked. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is basically trying to distill down 600 people's efforts over the last basically 13 weeks, or now probably 18 weeks, I guess now, into a 15-minute presentation to try to let you know, we're spending money at a pretty good clip, and you probably are interested in what we're spending it on. So, with that, immediately is the project consultant, or not consultant, project contractor that was selected for the project through bid, and they are as local as we're going to get for any kind of a contractor. They're actually located in Clarkston, Washington, so they're right here in the Palouse region. And this really goes through kind of what Mead and Hunt is our consultant, and what Diatley, and there's another contractor known as Michaels that is doing work on behalf of Avista, and where we're at with the project, and a bunch of pretty good pictures to try to distill down what happened. I went through about 4,000 pictures to come up with 40 to try to show this. So the current situation of the airport, and I left this slide in here because, well, the one time I took it out of a presentation, people got upset because it really shows the runway where it lines up with Moscow Mountain, and you can see that, in this area. And the issue is the runway and the taxiway are too close together, so the area that we're talking about now is moving the runway, if you're looking at the slide, off to the right of where it is right now, and trying to line the runway up into here instead of here. The timeline, we finished the environmental assessment in 2014. We received $16 million of federal money in last year. This year was $25 million, and we just this last week were able to acquire an entitlement transfer from the Port of Bellingham, that money that they were not going to use for project for the FAA, that the FAA went and requested that they release it to the cities of Pullman and Moscow to fill the need for the project that we have, which is extremely gracious of them and very well appreciated. Land acquisition and design, we're working through that. Negotiations on the private property side are completed. We're still working with Washington State University. We are working underneath the Uniform Relocation Act, which is a congressional law, and also with the FAA. They have a specific order, 5100.37 Bravo, that deals with land acquisition and how it works. The construction, we started that, and a lot of the pictures have to do with what is going on with that particular endeavor. And so to kind of show what's going on, 2015, you can see the yellow line that goes around. That's the power line, is this piece here. And then we're really talking about this work right here is really what you're going to see. 2016 shows that there's going to be a lot more work to the east side, and that just did not. There's some work that happened over here, but not all the way down. So in 2017, we're really looking at trying to get the remainder of this work done, and then this work will be bid. And they're both about the similar size.
Okay, take a second before you go to the
Okay.
next slide, Tony, and explain to folks which is the east side and which is the west side, so it's clear to everyone, so they can.
Okay, so
Everybody's
this is the west side. This is Washington State University, and this is the golf course. This is the east side. This would be where the marijuana facilities that are in Pullman are at this point right now, and then the large hill that is at the end of that runway that's end. I'm hoping this works and that we actually got sound, but this is a typical day when they started on the project, and it kind of shows what happens with scrapers, and what you're going to see with this before I click the video on is you're going to see dozers pushing scrapers to try to get earthwork up, because the clay soils that are underneath,
heavy.
It's heavy, it's hard to push, and it's amazing the amount of horsepower that goes into this. But at this point, there were about 40 pieces of equipment on 60 acres and flying around. Those dump trucks are doing about 65 miles an hour. It's just amazing. It looks like giant pig pen flying down the landscape.
If you could imagine, I sat out through this summer several different times, and it looked like a NASCAR race with a bunch of great big earth scrapers. And I mean, these tires were taller than I am standing up.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, and Tony's not exaggerating, they're clipping along at a fast, in my view, scary pace. It's a good thing I'm not driving one of those things, I tell you
Yeah,
what.
we were amazed, just coordination and everything, how it worked, because you've got scrapers moving, and then you've got dump trucks, and they're trying to turn as fast as they can go, because time is money, and you're trying to move millions of cubic yards as fast as you can when the weather's good, and that was the goal for them to try to do.
And Tony, didn't you tell us once how many trips they tried to make per day in one of your presentations?
I don't recall if it was trips, but how many cubic yards. I've got figures on basically what was done by the end of October, but I don't have daily figures. I think I might have had it at one time, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Well, early on, they were doing 30,000 cubic yards a day.
They were, when they first started, they were moving. When they did topsoil in that first big hit, it was about 30,000 yards. This is the right-of-way that goes around, that was designated to go around Pullman. And so the airport project, one of the projects was going to exist and one of them was not. There was a bypass that was supposed to, I guess if this was Pullman over here, this bypass was supposed to go all the way up and around and connect to 95. And the state of Washington Department of Transportation had it in a plan, but there was no funds for it, and it was purchased in the 70s. The city of Pullman didn't support it. Whitman County didn't support it. Washington State University didn't support it. And they were looking at a south bypass, and one project was going to survive and one not, and we are consequently buying this portion of the right-of-way for the runway to move forward because it's in a zone that you cannot have a road in. So ironically, they can be donated as a road. but the FAA doesn't allow you to accept donated things for restricted purposes, so we are purchasing it, and we're using it as a road so they don't inadvertently destroy Highway 270. But the groundbreaking, if anybody was familiar with the groundbreaking on this project was actually right here. This gives an idea of the cut and the, I guess, the angle of the cut when you look at how they did this piece, and then how much equipment is moving, and then you can see box culvert down here at the end, and we'll show some pretty neat pictures. We basically had to pipe Airport Creek, which runs through the airport currently, and comes out. It comes in the east side and goes out the west side, and that's got to be put in a box. And that's a pretty neat endeavor where they had to go down to bedrock, and there's some really cool pictures of how they put that into place. But this is just them working. This is a fun story. So anytime you do a big earthwork project, especially around here, and you're going to do 60, 70, 80, 90 feet of fill, things are going to compact. They're going to settle with time. And so Strata, which is local, and they are the geotechnical engineering company that is on this project, they had to put $30,000 worth of sensors in, so you knew how much feet or inches or whatever you're going to have over the time, probably feet, how much compaction we have, and then how much deflection we have, because you're rising earthwork up as you go. So they put these sensors in the ground, and then we had to figure out, okay, well, if a scraper goes by, or one of those dump trucks at 65 miles an hour goes by and they hit one of those, we're going to have to dig them all up and spend another $30,000. Well, how do you do that? One thing we figured out was scraper operators won't hit the national standard. So the flags, and you'll be able to see the next picture shows, but that delineates where those instruments are. And here you can see the flag is way down here. And they're looking at that from a haul road, but you can see it from quite a ways away, so they stayed away from it. And we were able to get really good data out of Strata that was presented to the airport board. So Strata could say, this is what we engineered to, this is what we thought it was, and here's the numbers and the data actually bearing that out. It's on track for where it's supposed to be. This is Airport Creek, and we had to build a separate alignment for that. And so they plasticed it up, and they built a separate alignment just to temporarily reroute that so they could start putting culvert in. And you can see equipment staged up at the top, and they're starting to do lifts, and we'll look at that here with this. This is, they went through here with a cat with basically a big claw on the back of it to just rake up how hard the clay was so they could just get it moved and get a scraper to use it. And so you can see it's kind of rubbleized. It looks like a bunch of rock, but it's not rock. It's just really, really, really hard clay. So they do everything in lifts because you got to compact it. And one of the things that's really difficult about the soil around the airport and in the Palouse in general is there's a lot of water in it. And water does not percolate down through the soil. It sits in the soil, and to be able to get compaction on it to where it'll compact to what the engineer says it has to be, you do a whole bunch of earthwork and you lay it out in a big thin sheet, and you're seeing about 4 inches at a time, and then they've got to pack it down. And they do that over and over and over again. Well, if you're doing 4 inches at a time and you're doing them over 20 acres, it takes a while to move that much earthwork. And if you've been out there recently and you've seen how tall some of that is, that's 4 inches at a time for that many acres. It's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. This is the water. They opened up the topsoil and they got down to clay, and all of a sudden we had a spring. And it happened immediately. There's standing water anywhere you get close to bedrock. And here, because of the nature of how the Palouse was formed and the Lake Missoula, the floods and those kinds of things, you get basalt, and then it looks like, if you go to the channeled scablands, it looks like a big canyon, and then it filled in with silt. So you've got some places where bedrock is 6 inches away, and some places where it's could be 600 feet. And so water tends to spring up in odd locations from time to time, and we found a lot of that with the project. So how do you get rid of the water? You got to get a certain amount of water out. This is a farm tractor with a disc, and they are disking that so they can get it compacted so the the scrapers can run over it, and it'll actually dry out enough to get the compaction. So each 4 inches, they're doing this. This is the scraper. You can see kind of what you saw with the video is they've got a big belly dump in here, and the earthwork's spilling out of it. And the amount of torque that they have to use to push one of those is just unreal. And when you do a lot of torque and you're pushing a lot of weight, things like that happen. So this one blew a tire. And like Bill said, the tire is taller than you are, and the tire cost $12,500 a piece. They blew 3 in a week, in the first week, trying to move earth. And so it's just an amazing thing to watch. The maintenance, they were running 12-hour days, and then they were basically mechanics are working the other 12 hours just to make sure that everything's up and moving for the next day. This is the box culvert. Came 2 to a truck. And so far we have placed 365 sections. There's 182 trucks that came from Salt Lake City with that box culvert on it. So we saw a lot coming through and in and out to get that placed. And inside the box culvert, what did we design it to? Right there it says Boeing 737-800. So they specifically designed this concrete box to fit the aircraft, charter aircraft that we predominantly use. And here's the box going in. They started it up, and it's basically like a fit-together toy. As they keep sliding pieces in, and then they seal them up. And the tolerances, well, there's a picture of the tolerances, but they're extremely close. And you've got to set it just right, because if it's backwards, then the water doesn't flow the right way. And if it's tipped too far, then you have too much coming out, and then you end up eroding everything downstream. So there's a lot of engineering that went into just designing this and getting it to where you could put water through it. So they're digging down to get the box culvert. They've got to get to bedrock, and the reason for that is water sits here, and then you've got bedrock. Well, if you design the box culvert where it should go and you don't fill that up with rock, then you've got water hitting bedrock, and it's going underneath the bedrock, and it's eroding your box. So the box starts to fall, and over time, you end up in a big problem. So they had to go dig, and this kind of shows how far they had to dig. You got one excavator digging down and dropping, and then another excavator picking up from there and dropping. And these excavators, I think the buckets are 35 or 40 feet. So they're going down quite a ways. And again, water. So here they're hitting bedrock, and you start seeing the groundwater seep into the project. But they're loading trucks. You can see that's a big dump truck. I can't remember how many cubic yards those hold, but the tires are taller than I am. And you can see how much material is going into there. This is drilling, and they drilled because they needed to blast. We got to the point where the bedrock got really close, and so you've got this piece of bedrock that sits up here, and then it drops off. Well, they had to get rid of it, so they drilled, I don't remember how many holes, but it was thousands of holes, and set charges over 2 separate days to blast that out so they could get the rock out. This is hydroseeding. They had to do hydroseeding quite a lot, because you got to keep the material from eroding and ended up in the creek, and then you have an ecological nightmare because you just stopped up everything downstream in the creek because you couldn't control the runoff. So there's a lot, and it's millions of gallons of hydroseed that they put in, I'm pretty sure. It wasn't a little bit, and there's a lot of hydroseeding had to take place over time. This is Michael's. This is a power line going up. So we took the existing power line and we moved it. So one going up, and here's one. This gives you an idea. And Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are 35-foot or 40-foot power poles that are in here. So this is 40 feet. This is an island of earth all by itself. Everything else is removed. So the existing power line was here, and the contractor had to work around that until we could switch the power lines over, and there was a lot of work to try to get that done. And so that power line sat on its own out on that island until 2 weeks ago, and it was finally taken down when they were able to switch the alignments.
Tony, before you go on, too, you might want to mention how the distance, because where that power line is, where it's set up, and that 30 feet, they went quite a distance that had to be dug out.
Yeah, there's another.
I have no idea how many feet to the west or the east that went, but it was quite a distance.
Yeah, they had to be guy wire away. So it was, I think it was 250 feet outside of this when they got to the base, and they just built it up like that, and it sat on its own. It's just one big earth island that they just kept digging around. And this shows just from a long ways away, they're still farming. So here's the disc, and here's the tractor, and here, they're working this entire thing back and forth with the disc, trying to dry it out. And this was August time frame. So this is the tolerance on the box, less than an inch. And then they seal that up because the box has to be watertight. You've got to be able to put the creek and a floodplain inside of it. And we start seeing water show up in the box itself, and we get into October, which everybody that I've talked to that's been here with any length of time is the wettest on record that I think anybody's ever seen, with how many rain days that we actually had. And so that got to be problematic. It's hard to do work and to get to bedrock when you've got to pump all the water out. You can't just pump the water out and pump it into the stream. You got to pump it into a truck and filter it out. It's not a simple just move the water over here and we'll just set it back in the channel. It doesn't work that way. This is runoff. This is from October. So you've got erosion fencing and you've got that temporary creek settlement that they've got in here, and it's already starting to silt in because there's so much water, it has nowhere to go. The ground is completely saturated, it has to go somewhere. This is work on the side of the terminal building, will be a future existing parking lot where they borrowed earthwork from a large hill that was here to use it on the project. This is a building for Washington State University to relocate a building that was underneath the power line. Nobody wants to work underneath the transmission line, and Avista doesn't want you working underneath it either. So we had to order a temporary office building, temporary meaning a couple of years probably, for those people to move in to a different office facility and the permanent facility to be able to be removed in the spring. And that was a large coordination between, and this construction coordination between the airport, Avista, and Washington State University. This is Airport Creek from the east going around Airport Road, and it just shows the creek full. This gets to the point where it floods. There's hangars you can't see over here, but it actually will flood over the hangars when it hits flood stage, which is why the reason that 6'8" box culvert is sized the way it is it has to handle all the flows coming off all of these hills and what comes through the existing creek alignment. So the temporary, they're running through, and then you start seeing, so you get the temporary here, and then you've got power lines, and you start seeing how high this is getting. This was down where the power line is, and now it's starting to build. This is both sides, so this is looking west, this is looking east, and this is box culvert. And this is box culvert. So by the time we finish with box culvert, it's 2,920 linear feet. That's over half a mile of box culvert that's placed in the ground right now. So you put the box culvert in, and you can't, like we stated before, you can't just dump the creek back in. You've got to slow everything down, and then you got to figure out, well, how do you keep fish and things like that out of it? They did the count to see if there were fish in Airport Creek, and the Army Corps of Engineers came down and they flushed it, and they've got a net that's down at the end, and they caught 3 frogs. No fish. But this is the creek when they finished it. You can see the water's quite a bit clearer, and there's boulders in there now. And then they've got wrap here to keep erosion and allow vegetation to grow back in. And so you can see the wrap pretty well from this standpoint. And that's just basically woven straw, weed-free straw, and then they can seed this and it'll grow back. But this is the outfall. So it steps things up and allows the water to exit but not end up going back. It makes it harder for fish, if any, that are in the creek. You do see fish in Pullman, and so conceivably they can get up there. We didn't see any when the Army Corps was out, but it's a pretty neat piece of cast material, and this was down to, they had to do it down to 1/8 of an inch. So they're working in water, trying to place concrete just exactly 1/8 of an inch with big pieces of machinery, because you can't do that by hand. You have to do it with machinery. It takes unbelievably good operators, and this took about 3 days just to place this in correctly. This shows you the box. So here's the box, and this is going east, and you can see the bend, and it starts to take off. So it's a pretty massive structure. And then we're standing where you're looking at this picture from, it was this level to begin with. So you're standing on probably, at this point, 40 feet of fill material. The road they paved, they had this all dug up, and everybody that took Airport Road to go to the Pullman back way, this was dug up for quite a while, a couple of months, and they were trying to put the box through this way. And they finally got that repaved before winter hit, and they're in a winter shutdown now. The costs, where we're looking at, land acquisition, the stream relocations, floodplain, the power line, mobilization, site prep, drainage, the pavements, you got more drainage, so drainage earthwork, and then you've got the actual piping that you need. The lighting, navigational aids, the weather station, fencing, there's a whole bunch of things that go in, but it rolls up into a total cost with contingency of $119 million. Economic impacts are pretty important when you're looking at a project like this. Just current, the airport as it stands by itself is 212 direct jobs. The construction is 93 direct jobs every year for 5 years. There's 226 total jobs to be created because of the indirect effect, and it contributes the $20.1 million to our gross regional product. $3 million is local and state tax coffers annually. There is a split with that. Yes, the project's in Washington, and there are taxes that go to the state of Washington, and there are taxes based on sales tax for each project. Washington taxes the project, but then you've got all the other things. If they've got to buy a tire and they have to come over to Pate Machinery to buy the tire, that's $12,500 they're spending in the state of Idaho. So there is a difference in how money gets spent, because where you've got a lot of the larger ag businesses, and they're not in Pullman, they're actually located in Moscow. But to give an idea of what you kind of saw from the construction, there's growth. And our employments was people getting on a plane. There were 20,000, or 20% in 2014 to 15. So 2014 was 41,525. 2015, 50,883. It's the first time we'd ever broke 50. I've got a report from October 31st, to 2016, and the employments for 2016 are 49,562. We've got 2 months to go, so we're going to shatter probably 60,000 this year. That's 20% growth 3 years in a row. The catchment area that where people come in and go, it keeps getting bigger. Steve Peterson is an economist with the University of Idaho, did a very good economic study for the airport board and the sponsors, so you could see, okay, well, if we captured all the airline travelers in our market, you'd see that growth from 300 jobs to 814 jobs, and it would be an additional, it'd be $47.2 million in gross regional product. So it's a significant issue that we're dealing with growth, and it's not a one-off or a knockoff. It's something that's happening with this airport regularly. It's why we're doing the project that we're doing, but it's not a freak occurrence or a fluke. The traffic's actually here, and people are actually using the airport. This is 737 coming in to pick up Washington State University football team charter. So the project's watching this, and this is it sitting down, and you can see all of the activity and the size of what the actual project is, them working on all of that earthwork. So what did they actually do in quantities? So there's 716 square yards of asphalt pavement that they took up. They removed and salvaged a gate. They took out the old airport road culvert and the head wall where the creek used to come out. 1.8 million cubic yards of unclassified excavation. 107,000 cubic yards of muck excavation. That's the box trench to the bedrock. And so that is a different material. It's very, very black soil. It's like garden soil that comes out of there. 13,000 cubic yards of select borrow, which is rock that went in. And they constructed and abandoned the temporary stream bypass. 2,920 linear feet of 6x8 box culvert placed. 6,000 linear feet of 6-inch perforated underdrain with drain tile. 350 linear feet of 12-inch underdrain, and then a whole bunch of erosion control that you saw, and now they're in winter suspension. So they're about halfway through their contract right now, and they'll start up as soon as the weather conditions allow, and they'll remove the rest of the power line, and they'll continue to work. The goal right now is to have the next piece that's on the east end of the airport awarded and put out, well, at least put out to bid in March-April timeframe, so we can take advantage of good bid prices pending what happens with the federal government and timing for financing and those kinds of things. The current CR with Congress, a continuing resolution, runs out the 9th of December, and they'll put another one in. And everything that I'm hearing right now is that that'll get extended into March to give the new administration the time to decide priorities and how they want to move forward, and then they'll do another continuing resolution with whatever that direction is through the end of the year. Funding sources, this is important. This is a true regional project, and it is a true public-private partnership. Schweitzer Engineering and the Schweitzer family donated $2 million, $1 million each. We've got money coming from the state aviation divisions. I know Idaho's aviation division is looking at funding, the universities, the ports, the counties, and both cities. Both cities are definitely the driver, and they are the owner of the airport. So we are getting committed local funds, and there's money coming in to cover the project costs. And the faster we can get it done, the lower the cost is the goal. But we can only control the things that we do, and getting that $5 million additional entitlement money from the Port of Bellingham that they graciously gave up helps us keep within the pieces we can control. Yes, sir.
John.
That $5 million does not affect any of those numbers. Okay.
No, the $5 million is basically I'm getting money earlier than what was programmed. So if the FAA can find money earlier, and they are by far the significant price holder in this because they're funding 92% of it, they're trying to find funding. If a project falls out in the Northwest Mountain region, we are number one for getting that funds, and because they're trying to get us done and our project finished so they can move on to other projects that they've got within the 7 states that work with the region. So it's basically like getting an advance.
Thanks, John.
But it is definitely a community investment. I always love telling the story when I go to an airports conference, and there's a saying about airports: if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, because everybody's different on how they operate. And they'll ask about this project, and then they'll ask about how the airport's governed. And when I tell them it's 2 cities, 2 universities, and 2 counties, and oh, by the way, they're in 2 separate states, that on the political spectrum couldn't be more diametrically opposed, and it works. They just unbelievable. They just don't believe that. And it not only works, it works wonderfully because everybody knows what the value of aviation in our region is when we don't have interstates and we don't have rail or waterways or those kinds of things, but everything that is produced in the Palouse, whether it's garbanzo beans or wheat, or it's technological innovation, or it's research, or it's teaching, or any of those things, it all has a global impact, and that's our capability with air service is to keep that. So the long-term prospects, everything that we're seeing, it's going to be good. With that, I'll entertain whatever questions or.
One thing I wanted to point out, Tony, you'd mentioned they've moved 1.8 million cubic yards thus far, and the total is about 6.4 million cubic yards. So there's a lot of earth that is left to move.
Well, this current contract for them, they've moved 1.8, and I think their current contract is 3.5. So roughly a little more than half.
Questions for Tony?
No? Good report.
No, thank you for the update.
Look at that. Appreciate it.
Well, one thing, and a couple of things that I want to mention about the city of Pullman and the city of Moscow. This has been part of our infrastructure since 1939. That's when the original agreement was, years before I was ever born, thank goodness. But anyway, this has been an infrastructure project for both communities, and it affects both communities hugely, both universities, both towns, and the entire Palouse. And so, as you had stated correctly, Tony, we do not have a freeway system here. We do not have a waterway system here. We do not have a rail system here. So we've got to have some global means, and this is going to give the Palouse in our area, which is with very global products that are being produced all the time here on the Palouse, and that will open it up for us more for in the future. It's a big deal for us. So, good report.
That's amazing. It delivers opportunity, and I think the biggest thing to me, not being from the Palouse, I'm originally from Montana, it delivers on quality of life in such a way that very few projects actually do, because every other project, if it's a highways project or it's a waterway project or it's anything else that the federal government is involved in, it doesn't belong to you. And airports are different. It belongs to the community that has it, and the FAA participates, and they operate by the golden rule, i.e. they have the gold and they make the rules. But that's how the system's safe, and aviation's got a perfect record. They've never left one up there, and they want to continue that perfect record and not have any incidents and bring them all down correctly, so they control it through the funding mechanism, and it's not a bad way to go.
Catherine?
I just remember the last time you were here, too, you talked about service to Boise, and then you also talked about a potential of other carriers.
Yeah, so opportunities with the runway right now. Alaska flies a Q400 in here, 76 seats. So the airport was built for 19-seat aircraft. And then Alaska Horizon at the time, which is a subsidiary of Alaska, they get bigger airplanes. And airlines started to figure out as they started to go bankrupt that they needed larger seats and less frequency. You needed to use as much utility out of an airplane and get it bigger so you could save fuel costs. For an airline, the two largest costs they have are fuel and labor. And so that put us into the category, okay, well, we're going to go up to 38 or 36 seats, and now we're into 76 seats, and that necessitated a change in the runway, or you lose the air service. Well, now that you can land 76 seats and it's being sized, the 737 and the Q400, as far as the FAA is concerned, is the same size. They need the same separation distance, the same as a 737-800 or an A319 Airbus, A320 Airbus. And so that gives the community the opportunity, when the runway's done and now it meets standards, what would you like to have for service? Can we petition for Boise? Absolutely. Can we petition for Minneapolis? Can we petition for Denver or Salt Lake? And when you look at a community like Helena, Montana, which is about 100,000 employments, we're at 60, they're 100. They have service that goes to Seattle, Salt Lake, Minneapolis, and Denver. There is no reason that Pullman and Moscow could not have that same opportunity with the infrastructure. Just right now, chasing air service is very difficult when you don't meet the standards as it is.
Gina?
Tony, thank you, first of all, for the update and the videos. And I would like to encourage you to come back with more often.
As we go,
Please.
I'll keep bringing them.
Will you go back to your slide that showed each entity and how much went in? Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing WSU.
Okay, so reason for WSU is we're in the middle of the negotiation with WSU right now, so we're not counting WSU until the land negotiation's done. And between the time that this was started, you had a change in administration with the passing of Nelson Floyd, and now there's new administration. There was a gap in there where it was interim, and a lot of those things were going on. We didn't know with land acquisition what the impacts were. A lot of the things we're doing with WSU right now is just education on our part. What is it that we are impacting, and how does it actually work? And it takes experts and a lot of time to try to figure that out. But that's why you do not see them on the match at this point, is I don't have a number that would be placed there.
Okay.
I don't know
I
what it would
appreciate
be.
that.
Jim?
How many seats are on a 737, Tony?
Roughly 150, depending on how it's configured.
So almost twice as much as the Q400 then, or a little more than that.
One point of interest I wanted to mention, you talked about two communities and two states and two universities, and I had a conversation with Anthony Fox, and for those that don't know who Anthony Fox is, he's the Secretary of Transportation of the United States, and he was on campus here 2 years ago, and I got a chance to visit with him about this airport realignment, and he was at one time a former mayor of Charlotte, and so it was kind of interesting, and he said, man, I don't know how you guys do it, but it's a good story for us in the United States because North Carolina and South Carolina, they hated each other. You know, it's amazing. People hate each other. You know, from one state to the next or one city to the next, kind of a goofy thing. And I said, well, you know, we're too small. We got to work together to get stuff done. I mean, that's part of our survival here on the Palouse. And I said, that's why we call it the Palouse, because what happens affects all of us here, whether you're in Washington or whether you're in Idaho. So it's a big deal for all of us. But I thought that was kind of interesting comments, because Tony's absolutely right. When you talk to folks about it, they think you're not telling them the truth, or come on, you know, is this really working for you? It's I mean, it's amazing, and I've heard that back in Washington D.C. a number of times, and so it is a good thing we're working together to get this thing done.
Yeah, it's always interesting when we go to meet with the congressional delegations in both for both states, and you bring two mayors in, and one's their mayor and one's not, but they're saying the same thing. They listen, and they get it really fast that this is extremely important to our region, and the congressional side of it has been a lot of fun. Is keeping them involved and informed as we're going through. That it is a unique project and it does actually work. So it's something that regardless of whether you're on the Washington side or the Idaho side, or whether you're a D or an R, it's important to all of them, and that's been very encouraging.
Well, kind of a fun thing here. A few weeks ago, we had a legislative tour here in North Idaho where we had newly elected as well as folks that had been elected and served a number of terms, state senators and state representatives from all over our state, and we took a bus ride from here, and we took Airport Road, and I was like a tour bus guide. I had the microphone, and I was explaining as soon as we turned off about the Palouse and agriculture and then the entire airport, and I talked nonstop until we got over the top of the culverts, and we were headed up by the golf course. But the big thing with that was telling our legislators that we've got an airport. It's one of 7 airports that the state of Idaho recognizes, even though it's in the state of Washington. It's kind of an interesting thing. So you have Brent Hill, who is the president of the state senate. You know, he was on that bus, and I got a good conversation with him how it all worked and stuff. And so it's an amazing thing. So when we've got people all over the state, I mean, we got our representatives in our area that know all about it, but people from Blackfoot, Idaho, have no clue where Pocatello or Idaho Falls or Weiser or wherever you want to, wherever from. So it's kind of fun getting a chance to talk to those folks about it and how it all has worked for us and is working. So just wanted to throw that point in. Other questions for Tony? Thank you for the terrific report, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, with that ends our normal session. We've got reports that we're going to go into. The kids, you can write a good report to your class about the airport and the significance it is for all of us, and be terrific. And I'll start with you, Jim, on reports.
Okay. Well, admin did not meet last week, so I don't have much to report. I don't have a meeting until Transportation Commission this Thursday, so nothing to report, sir.
Gina.
Kind of the same as Mr. Boland. Nothing to report.
My meetings start tomorrow. However, you, myself, and Gina went down to Lewiston last week to the AIC informational meeting that they hold a couple of times a year. Those are always good. You're able to be reminded of some things you may have forgotten, and there's usually 1 or 2 tidbits that you did not know about. It's a worthwhile way to spend most of the day. The AIC employees do a great job. They've got the facts and the figures. They give us input on all sorts of things, including how to run a meeting and any number of other things worthwhile.
Catherine?
Yeah, I had historic preservation, and they're looking into interpretive signage and the pricing, checking of that, especially things to use at the farmer's market, the big retractable 3x3s, and so about $1,700. So they're trying to stay within their budget. And they got a letter from the state board, and they have to apply to get the Fort Russell Historic Designation done. They also have to count all the outbuildings. So they thought they were done, but now they're not yet. So they've got another loophole to do. There's about 250 properties that they have to go count the outbuildings for and get those labeled as either contributing or not contributing to the historic district. So that's fun. And then they're working on brochures. And then there is a seat available for the commission. So that would be good. And they could also be a resident of the county. And then the other meeting that I was at was the Bike Share Palouse one that was started, and I'm going to be able to update you all on, and that's kind of moving forward. So looking forward to kind of catching up on that at some point.
Okay, very good. I've got a couple of things to speak about. As John had mentioned, we had an AIC district meeting in Lewiston on November 29th. John and Gina and I attended that. On the 30th, I had an airport board meeting, and some of the stuff that Tony talked about today, we discussed in that airport board meeting, so it's an exciting thing for us. One fun event that we had last week was the downtown lighting of the tree and the parade that we had on December the 1st. That was a kick. It was very well attended. It was a lot of fun, had some great entrance in it, and it was a real kick. It was a little bit cool that evening, but it was very, very nice. And that lighted holiday tree at Friendship Square really is adding some class to our downtown. I think that's really neat. And then on December 2nd, I made a one-day trip to AIC board meeting in Boise. Went down there and got back late that night. That was a long doggone day, but we talked about a bunch of different things that we're going to try to present before our legislative groups when we meet with them in January. And then on December 3rd, we had the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department ball. So we talked with the fire department. Gary and I attended that. That was a fun evening. And last but not least, tomorrow night on December 6th, we are going to have the ASUI leadership in here, kids. So we're going to have us right here. So those kids that came from the university with us tonight, they're welcome to come and see us again tomorrow night if they wish. It's going to be a fun evening, and we will have that leadership as well, not only the senators and representatives for the student body, but also President Staben and some of his folks, some of the deans, as well as us counselors. Counselors, keep that in mind. It starts at 5:30 tomorrow, so all of us counselors need to be there, and Gary as well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Gary. Do you have anything?
Only a couple scheduling issues. We've got the monthly breakfast meeting at the University of Idaho, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. Hope to see you all there if you can make it. Don't forget the holiday potluck that all the council members are invited to come break bread with the employees. That'll be on the 16th of December on Friday, 11:30 till 1:30. And with that, I have nothing further.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Adjourn.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are out of here, 7:53. Thank you, everybody.